Cemeteries are supposed to be quiet, but for those who guard them after dark, they become something else entirely. The silence isn't peaceful, it's oppressive, heavy, and broken by sounds that should never be there. A distant creak of a gate that no one touched. Footsteps crunching on gravel when every visitor left hours ago. A cold wind that carries whispers with no source. For security guards, working the graveyard shift in the truest sense of the word means stepping into a world where the living and the dead feel far too close. Most of us only see cemeteries during the day, flowers on headstones, sunlight softening the sadness. But when the gates close and the sun sinks beneath the horizon, those same rows of stone become a forest of shadows. And the men and women tasked with protecting those grounds know the truth. Cemeteries don't sleep. They breathe. They groan. And sometimes, they awaken things that shouldn't be disturbed. Tonight, you will hear 3 true stories from cemetery security officers. These aren't urban legends or tales passed around by kids daring each other on Halloween. These are first-hand accounts from professionals whose job was simply to keep watch, but who found themselves facing something far beyond trespassers or vandals. The first story will take you into the heart of a deserted cemetery just past midnight, when a flashlight beam caught something no human eye should ever see. The second, told by a guard with years of experience, will prove that even those hardened to the silence of death can be broken by one terrifying night. And the third, well, the third is the story no security guard ever wanted to admit. It's the kind of encounter that makes you question whether the graves are really closed at all. As you listen, remember this. These guards were trained, alert, and rational. Their job was to deal with the living, not the dead. Yet what they witnessed changed them forever. And by the time we reach the final story, you might find yourself looking differently at every cemetery you've ever passed. Because sometimes, the scariest part isn't what lies beneath the ground. It's what walks among the headstones when no one is supposed to be there. So settle in, dim the lights if you dare, and prepare yourself. These are 3 true cemetery security horror stories. Encounters so chilling, you'll never walk past a grave alone again. And trust me, the last one will haunt you the most. Chapter 2. The first story. The Shadow. By the Mausoleum. It was just after midnight when David, a cemetery security guard with only 3 months on the job, made his usual rounds. The air was thick and damp, the kind of stillness that made even his radio static sound too loud. His flashlight beam cut across rows of headstones, each casting long skeletal shadows across the grass. He had walked this route a dozen times before, but that night felt heavier, as if the entire cemetery was holding its breath. The problem began near the old mausoleum, a stone structure that dated back to the late 1800 seconds. Locals whispered about it, claiming the family entombed there had been cursed. David never believed such things. To him, it was just another structure to check for vandalism. But as he approached, he noticed something unusual. The heavy iron door was ajar. That was impossible. Earlier, he had double-checked the locks himself. His first thought was trespassers, teenagers, sneaking in to scare themselves. He steadied his flashlight and pushed the door wider, calling out, "Security, you need to come out." Silence answered. The beam swept across the stone interior, dusty benches, cracked marble, and urns, but no people. Just as he turned to leave, his light caught movement in the corner. A figure stood there, too tall, too still. David froze. The shape didn't move, didn't breathe. He raised his light again, but the beam seemed to bend, refusing to land properly on the figure. The air dropped in temperature, his breath turning visible in the stale room. He reached for his radio, but static drowned the channel. That's when the figure finally shifted. It glided, not stepped toward him. Panic surged. David stumbled backward out of the mausoleum, slamming the door shut. He braced himself against it, heart hammering, waiting for the door to rattle with force from the inside. But nothing. The silence was worse than any sound. Gathering courage, he leaned forward, ear pressed to the cold iron. From within, a whisper slid through low, rasping words he couldn't understand. His knees nearly buckled. David fled, abandoning his route. By morning, he reported the door broken, claiming vandals had pried it open. But when the groundskeeper inspected it, the lock was intact, untouched, no sign of forced entry. And yet David knew what he had seen, what he had felt pressing against his chest as he escaped. He quit the job within weeks, never telling the full truth. Even now, he insists that something stood inside that mausoleum, waiting. And he's certain that if he hadn't run when he did, he would never have left that place alive. And this was just the first story. The next comes from a veteran guard, someone who thought he had seen it all, until one terrifying night changed his mind forever. Chapter 3. The second story. The woman in white. For Marcus, cemetery security wasn't just a job, it was routine. He had worked night shifts for nearly 8 years, and nothing surprised him anymore. Vandals, kids sneaking in, even the occasional stray dog roaming between graves, he had seen it all. But one night, in early autumn, he realized some disturbances can't be explained by the living. The cemetery was vast, with winding gravel paths lined by old oak trees. A cool breeze pushed fallen leaves across the ground, making them rustle like footsteps. Around 2:30 a.m., Marcus began his patrol near the east section, where a series of ornate angel statues overlooked family plots. His flashlight flickered slightly, though his batteries had been fresh. He tapped the casing, muttered under his breath, and kept moving. That's when he saw her. A woman in a white dress stood about 50 feet ahead, directly in the middle of the path. Her hair hung long and dark, and though her head was slightly bowed, Marcus felt her eyes lock onto him. He called out, "Ma'am, the cemetery is closed. I'll need you to leave." No answer. He raised his voice. "This is private property. I have to escort you out." Still, nothing. The woman didn't move. Marcus gripped his flashlight tighter and stepped forward. But after 3 strides, the beam sputtered and died completely. Darkness swallowed the path. His instincts screamed at him to draw his sidearm, but training held him back. Instead, he reached for his radio. Static. No signal. When he lifted his eyes again, the woman was closer. Much closer. She hadn't walked, she was simply there. Now less than 20 feet away. Her face was pale, features blurred as if he were looking through fog. The hem of her dress hovered just above the ground, untouched by dirt or leaves. Marcus's chest tightened. He forced himself to take one more step forward, demanding, "Who are you?" The woman finally moved, lifting her head slowly. Her eyes hollow black voids that swallowed every ounce of light. A sound like a distant wail carried on the wind, piercing through his skull. His body reacted before his mind did. He stumbled backward, nearly tripping over a headstone. When he looked again, she was gone, vanished, as if she had never stood there. But the smell of damp earth lingered, stronger than before, as though something had just been unearthed nearby. Marcus finished his shift in silence, refusing to enter that section again. He handed in his resignation 2 days later, telling his supervisor only that the East Path isn't safe. He never elaborated. And if you thought this story was unsettling, just wait. Because the third account doesn't end with a disappearance. It ends with something that followed the guard home. Chapter 4. Third story. The Watcher Beyond the Fence. Elias had always prided himself on being rational. A former police officer, he took a job as a cemetery security guard after retirement, assuming it would be quieter, safer work. The dead can't hurt you, he often joked to his colleagues. But one winter night, he discovered that sometimes it isn't the dead inside the cemetery you should worry about. It's what waits just outside. His patrol began around midnight. The air was crisp, frost forming on the grass as his boots crunched along the gravel path. In the distance, he could see the tall iron fence that encircled the cemetery, its spikes glinting faintly under the pale moonlight. That was when he noticed it. A figure standing motionless beyond the fence line, just where the forest began. At first, Elias thought it was a lost hiker, or perhaps a homeless man seeking shelter. He called out, his voice carrying into the silence, "You can't be there. Move along." No response. The figure didn't shift, didn't flinch, just stood. As he walked closer, the details became unsettling. The figure was tall, unnaturally so. Its shoulders narrow, its arms too long. Its head seemed tilted, as if it were studying him. Elias shone his flashlight, but the beam bent strangely, never landing directly on the figure. It was like light itself refused to touch it. He radioed his partner at the gate, but the signal cut with sharp bursts of static. The silence pressed in, broken only by the faint sound of breathing not his own, carried on the cold air. And then, without warning, the figure moved. It didn't step. It glided along the fence, keeping perfect pace with Elias as he walked the inside perimeter. Every time he stopped, it stopped. Every time he moved, it moved. Unease curdled into dread. Elias quickened his pace, his heart pounding in rhythm with his boots. The figure followed, silent, tireless, until it reached a section of the fence where the iron bars had slightly bent outward. There it pressed one elongated hand against the bars, and Elias swore the metal groaned, bending further under its touch. He turned and fled, refusing to look back until he reached the office. When he finally did glance over his shoulder, the figure was gone. The forest stood still, empty, as if nothing had ever been there. But when he returned the next morning with other staff, the fence showed fresh marks, iron, warped outward, as though something had tried to squeeze through. Elias never joked about the dead again, because he knew what he saw that night wasn't buried underground. It was waiting, watching, and testing the barrier between their world and ours. And if you think these stories are unsettling now, the next one will show what happens when the horror doesn't stay behind in the cemetery, but follows a guard all the way home. Chapter 5. The most shocking story. The haunting that followed home. For Luis, working security at the cemetery had always been a matter of discipline. He kept meticulous logs, checked every gate, and never let superstition cloud his judgment. But one stormy night, something shattered his careful order, something that refused to stay within the cemetery's walls. It started during a thunderstorm. Rain pelted down in sheets, and the trees bent like they were bowing under the weight of the wind. Luis was alone in the western sector, a part of the cemetery rarely visited, where older graves had crumbled and names were long forgotten. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the twisted angel statues and broken crosses. That was when he saw it. A man standing between two graves, head tilted, watching him. Luis shouted through the rain, demanding the intruder identify himself. No answer. He advanced, boots sinking into the muddy ground. Another flash of lightning lit the sky, and the man was gone. Only soaked earth remained where he had stood. Shaken, Luis returned to his patrol hut hours later, soaked and exhausted. He told himself it was a trick of the storm, fatigue, nothing more. But when his shift ended near dawn and he drove home, the feeling of being followed never left. The rhythm of the wipers against the windshield seemed to match the sound of footsteps behind his car. That night, as he lay in bed, his wife stirred awake and whispered, "Who's in the hallway?" Luis bolted upright. The house was dark, silent. He grabbed his flashlight and swept the beam down the hall. For a second, he caught the outline of a figure, tall, unmoving, before it vanished as quickly as it appeared. Over the next week, the disturbances grew worse. Doors opened by themselves. The family dog refused to go near the bedroom. At night, They heard knocking 3 sharp raps on the wall, always at the same time. 3:15 a.m. Luis prayed, recited psalms, even sprinkled holy water given by a friend. But nothing stopped the presence. His wife begged him to quit the cemetery job, convinced he had brought something back with him. The breaking point came one night when their young daughter woke screaming. She said a man in the corner of her room had been smiling too wide. Luis rushed in, but saw nothing, only the faint imprint of wet footprints trailing across the carpet, ending at her bed. Luis quit the next morning, resigning without notice. He moved his family across town, but he admitted to a colleague years later that sometimes, especially during storms, he still feels it. A chill in the hallway, a shadow that lingers too long. Footsteps behind him when he's sure he's alone. He doesn't guard cemeteries anymore. But the truth is, some things don't stay buried. They follow. And with that, we come to the end of our 3 true cemetery security horror stories. But before we close the gates for tonight, there's one last thought you need to hear. Chapter 6. Closing and Finale. Cemeteries are built as places of rest, monuments of memory, where families come to honor those who have passed. But for the security guards tasked with protecting them after the gates close, they become something far darker. You've just heard 3 true stories, each one a reminder that when the world goes quiet, the boundary between the living and the dead feels dangerously thin. Think back to David, who faced the impossible inside the mausoleum. His story reminds us that sometimes, the structures built to seal away the dead don't hold as tightly as we believe. Marcus, the veteran guard, discovered that years of experience mean nothing when confronted by a presence that shouldn't exist. And Luis, his account proves that the horror of the cemetery doesn't always stay behind. Sometimes, it follows you home, seeping into your family, your sanctuary, and your life. What ties these stories together isn't just fear, it's transformation. Each guard went into their shift, expecting routine patrols, simple work, but each left changed forever. Some quit their jobs, some carried their dread in silence, and some never spoke of it again. Because how do you explain to others that shadows move when they shouldn't, that voices whisper from behind locked doors, that something unseen glides at your side while you walk a fence line? And perhaps the most chilling question is this: if cemeteries are meant to be places of peace, why do so many who watch them at night speak of unrest? Why do so many insist that they were not alone, even when every grave should have been silent? Maybe cemeteries don't just hold the dead, they hold what lingers. Memories, energies, echoes of people unwilling to fade. And when the sun sets, when the gates close, those echoes may become more than just shadows in the dark. So the next time you pass a cemetery at night, ask yourself, if you heard footsteps behind you, would you dare turn around? Or would you keep walking, hoping that whatever follows chooses not to notice you? If these stories made you think twice about the silence of cemeteries, then you know why security guards rarely share what they've seen. Their experiences are warnings. Before you go, let me ask you this. Have you ever experienced something strange near a graveyard? A sound, a shadow, a feeling you couldn't explain? Share your story in the comments. We may feature it in a future video. And if you want more terrifying TRU accounts from those who face the darkness so you don't have to, be sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and join us every week. Because in the end, you may never walk past a grave alone again. Creative note: this video is an original production inspired by documented true events, historical records, and first-hand accounts. While the core foundation is based on real stories and testimonies, certain characters, dialogues, and sequences have been carefully adapted or dramatized for narrative clarity and to enhance the immersive storytelling experience. Our team dedicated over 130 hours to research, writing, fact-checking, and editing in order to ensure accuracy, authenticity, and high-quality presentation. Every scene has been crafted to strike a balance between historical truth and compelling narration, so that viewers can engage both emotionally and intellectually with the story. Please note, this production is not a copy of any other work. All content, including the research compilation, narration, script, structure, editing, and visuals, is entirely original and protected under international copyright law. Any unauthorized reproduction, re-uploading, or distribution without written permission is strictly prohibited. This video was created with deep respect for the real individuals and events that inspired it, and with the intent to bring hidden or forgotten stories to a wider audience.